The use of genetic information is a powerful tool that today is becoming more readily available to scientists. In order to use this powerful tool, it is necessary to know how to navigate throughout the entire genome. The human genome is about 3 billion base pairs long. In humans, this project is known as Human Genome Project. How can we generate genomic information? There are two ways in which genomic information is obtained. The first one is genomic library, which contains the entire human genome, and it consists of both exons and introns. Introns and exons are nucleotide sequences within a gene. Introns are removed by RNA splicing as RNA matures, and they are not expressed in the final mRNA product, while exons go into the covalently bonded to one another in order to create matured mRNA, and exons are the coding sequences whereas introns are the non-coding sequences. And the second method is cDNA or complementary DNA library that contains only expressed genomic informations. That is, it only consists of exons. A genomic DNA library of an organism is a collection of clones. It can be colonies or plaques containing all the fragments of genomic DNA of this organism in a suitable vector. To construct this library, genomic DNA of organism is fragmented and all the fragments are ligated to a linearized vector. The recombinant vector molecules are introduced into the cells of a host. And when the vector is a plasmid, each transformed cell of the host is grown to form a colony, and when the vector is a virus, each recombinant viral molecule is made to infect a lawn of host cells and it is termed as plague. Hence, a collection of colonies or plagues representing the entire genome is obtained. Genomic DNA libraries are quite suitable for cloning genes of prokaryotes, as the prokaryotic genes are small and their genes do not have introns. And in this case, the minimum number of clones required to represent the entire genome is about 5,000 to 10,000, and it is quite manageable. In contrast to the prokaryotic genomes, the eukaryotic genomes are very large and their genes generally carry several introns. The cloning of a eukaryotic gene by constructing a genomic library involves a very large number of clones, and hence for cloning of eukaryotic genes, complementary DNA libraries are preferred over genomic DNA libraries. So there you can see the significance of cDNA libraries. So what's a cDNA library? It's a collection of clones containing cDNA synthesized from the mRNA obtained from the cells in which the gene of interest was expressing. All the synthesized cDNA molecules are ligated to a linearized vector, and as in the case of genomic DNA libraries, these recombinant vector molecules are introduced into the cells of a host, and a collection of colonies or plaques is obtained depending on whether the cloning vector was a plasmid or a virus. So what are DNA libraries in general? It's a collection of clones of DNA designed so that there is a high probability of finding any particular piece of the source DNA in the collection. And these libraries, like the conventional libraries, are used to collect and store information, and the information is stored as a set of DNA molecules. All DNA libraries are collections of DNA fragments that represent a particular biological system of interest. And the two most common uses of these collections are DNA sequencing and gene cloning. So from where we can get the gene of interest for gene cloning? So one of the sources from genomic library. So how can we construct a genomic library of a phage? And why are we using phage? Because a large number of phage can be screened simultaneously, and a phage has a higher transformation efficiency, about 1,000 times higher compared to a plasmid. For example, we can use the lambda phage. So the first step is DNA isolation from phage. And the second step is cutting the isolated DNA into suitable sized fragments using restriction enzymes. And now we have the fragments and designated as at A, B, C, D and E. And step 3 is the incorporation of these fragments into a suitable vector. Vector can be a plasmid, cosmid, lambda phage, etc. And for the time being, we take this as plasmid for the introduction of the fragment. And step 4 is the introduction to a suitable host like bacterium, like maybe E. coli. And here we have the DNA molecule, that is plasmid with the DNA fragment we have introduced. So now we have the 5 fragments incorporated in different bacterium. This is followed by multiplication inside the bacterium, and these plasmids replicates and will have a number of copies of that particular fragment, and from the rest we need to identify the colonies that is having this fragment. So in this step, multiplication, screening, identification and characterization of clones take place. The bacteria multiply continuously, forming colonies. Now in the Petri plate we have colonies formed from all these fragments. Colony A is having fragment A, and colony B is having fragment B, and so like C, D and E. So here in this plate there is a representation of the genomic library of the phage. All the fragments of the phage are present in the colonies of this plate, and a maintenance of set of these clones is termed as genomic library. So once again, let's see the steps in the construction of genomic library. The first one is isolation of DNA from cell under study. Then cutting this isolated DNA with restriction fragments of suitable size and incorporation of these fragments into a suitable vector. Later that, screening, identification, characterization of the clones. And finally, the maintenance of this set of clones is termed as genomic library. The main steps in the construction of cDNA library. The first one is synthesis of first and second complementary DNA strands. Then the methylation of cDNA at internal sites. And then the attachment of linkers and adapters and restriction digestion. And the fourth one is ligation of double-stranded DNA to vectors. And finally, introduction into host systems for amplification of cDNA clones. As we all know, eukaryotic gene consists of coding and non-coding regions. During transcription, both coding and non-coding regions are transcribed and forming a pre-mRNA with both exons and introns. Exons are expressing sequence that is translated to proteins. In eukaryotic system, there is a mechanism called RNA processing, where exons are retained and introns are removed. Now we have the mature mRNA translated to protein in case of eukaryotes. cDNA is synthesized from mature mRNA where exons are only present. Now we have the mRNA. It is having a speciality, having a poly A tail at the 3' region and 5' capping also. So we can easily design a primer as there is a poly A tail and a oligo DT primer. Using reverse transcriptase enzyme, the enzyme that is capable of synthesizing DNA from RNA template, it can synthesize a DNA strand. This red strand is the mRNA strand. So using this, the enzyme, we are synthesizing DNA strand. Now we have the first strand called complementary DNA, a strand that is complementary to mRNA. Now the enzyme like ribonuclease H is used to cleave RNA, and DNA polymerase like clinofragment is used to synthesize the second strand. This complementary DNA can be used to construct cDNA library. So what is the advantage of having cDNA over genomic library? So let us see the situation. This is the genomic library of eukaryotes. A, B, C, D, E refers to the genes, and the bacterial colony consists of these genes. And these colonies contain specific gene or specific fragment of DNA, and since it is maintained, it is called genomic library. In this case, the DNA is inserted in the colonies will be having both exons and introns. Generally for expression we use the bacteria E. coli. It's the most common prokaryotic host. So if you are using genomic library, the gene will be having both introns and exons. But prokaryotic host doesn't have a mechanism to splice out this intron and join exon. So this is difficulty. There's difficulty in expressing this particular gene. So there won't be any gene expression. So this is a problem while expressing a eukaryotic gene in a prokaryotic host. There come the importance of cDNA. Here we only have exons of a particular gene. When exons are introduced into bacterium, since as bacterium don't have introns, it can easily recognize the exons and no need of mRNA's processing and translation to protein take place very easily. So this is one of the main advantage for the expression of eukaryotic gene in prokaryotic host. So let's once again see the steps in cDNA synthesis. The first one is mRNA isolation from the cell and cDNA synthesis using reverse transcriptase enzyme. And second step is cDNA synthesized is joined with T4 ligase and 5'P is removed using alkaline phosphatase, and this will prevent the re-annealing process. And the third step is the incorporation of these fragments into a suitable vector like plasmid or phage. So we have a vector with cDNA fragment, and the fourth step is introduction of recombinant plasmid to a suitable host like bacterium, like E. coli, where it will multiply, and the screening, selection and characterization of clones are done. So we have the recombinant E. coli with the specific cDNA and it multiply inside the host. So now we have cDNA with 5 genes A, B, C, D and E of maybe yeast cells, and this is referred as cDNA library, where each of this colony will be having a particular cDNA of this organism, and maintenance of this set of clones is referred as cDNA library. Let's see a few of the advantages of cDNA. The conversion of mRNA sequences to double-stranded cDNA offers several advantages, and this includes, the first one is mRNA is naturally labile single-stranded molecule, and its conversion into more stable double-stranded cDNA facilitates long-term storage of these sequences. Second one is cDNA is representative of the mRNA population, that is, they have expressed genes of the cell. Thus, the synthesis of cDNA is the creation of a permanent biochemical record of the cell at the time of lysis. The third one is by synthesizing and cloning the resulting cDNA from a single source, a method for propagating the cDNA is created. This approach is greatly facilitated by the huge variety of vectors compatible with an equally impressive variety of hosts. Fourth one is cDNA molecules, both long and short, can be used to screen members of much more complex genomic DNA libraries. The general schema of double-stranded cDNA synthesis consists of the main three steps. That is, first cDNA strand synthesis, degradation of mRNA, and the second cDNA strand synthesis. And the first cDNA strand synthesis is a reaction that is catalyzed by reverse transcriptase, and the mRNA may be subjected to size fractionation before first cDNA strand synthesis. Reverse transcriptase requires primer to extend on, and the reaction leads to the formation of a hybrid between single-stranded cDNA and mRNA. And mRNA degradation happens by alkali treatment or by RNase H catalyzed making. This step provides primers for second cDNA strand synthesis, but there are few exceptions, like it does not happen in the case of self-priming of second cDNA strand and random primers catalyze second strand synthesis. This will not be happening. And the second cDNA strand synthesis using the first strand as template is a reaction that is catalyzed by a DNA-dependent DNA polymerase such as E. coli DNA polymerase 1 or Clino enzyme. The reaction requires primers, and the end result of this step is the formation of double-stranded cDNA. Size fractionation is used for enrichment of mRNA that are much larger or smaller in size than the bulk mRNA of the cell. Different ways of size fractionation include density gradient centrifugation and agarose gel electrophoresis. In density gradient centrifugation, different mRNAs present in a sample, when applied to the top of a pre-poured density gradient and subjected to centrifugation, they are separated according to size. The length of specific mRNA, and hence the cDNA that is to be cloned, influences the choice of primer and vector. The majority of mRNA species is between 1.5 and 2.0 kb in length. For these standard mRNAs, the primer of choice is oligo-DT, which is 12 to 18 nucleotides in length. The oligo-DT primer will anneal to the poly A tract, which is found at the 3' terminus of most eukaryotic mRNAs. There are, however, a number of mRNAs which are extremely long, and it would be difficult to synthesize complete cDNA copies from these long mRNAs in one piece. The first step in the synthesis of double-stranded cDNA is the formation of a single-stranded cDNA mRNA hybrid, which result from the synthesis of first cDNA strand using mRNA as a template. For cDNA strand synthesis, either total RNA or poly-A RNA can be used depending on the purpose. If the cDNA is to serve as a template for PCR, total RNA is usually sufficient, while poly-A RNA is employed if the cDNA is to be used as a hybridization probe. For first cDNA strand synthesis, mRNA template and primers are added together. The preparation is heated to 70 degrees Celsius to melt the secondary structure of a RNA, and then cooled slowly to room temperature to allow primer hybridization. It is called annealing of primers. Oligo-DT primers that represent a chemically synthesized structure of 16 to 20 adenosine residues are used when the mRNA species for which cDNA is required is polyadenated at the 3' end. The mRNA is not polyadenylated, oligo-DT primers cannot be used. Okay. The primer is added to the reaction mixture in large molar excess so that each molecule of mRNA binds several molecules of oligo-DT primer at its long poly A tail. The annealed primer supplies free 3' hydroxyl group which is extended by reverse transcriptase. Earlier also we mentioned about random primers. So random primers or random oligonucleotides are a collection of chemically synthesized oligonucleotides of random sequence, usually hexamers. These are produced by oligomerization of equal quantities of mixed A, G, C and T residues so that all possible hexameric sequences are present. The hexamers bind through the length of the mRNA molecule wherever it is complementary, resulting in internal priming of first DNA strand instead of priming from the 3' end of the template. Oligo-DT primer adapter or oligo-DT primer linker. For first cDNA strand synthesis, oligonucleotides such as oligo-DT primer adapter may also be employed. These primers consist of oligo-DT epinephrine at their 5' end with overhanging sequences that will support the addition of restriction enzyme sites or useful sequences on one end. The purpose of such primer adapter is directional cloning of double-stranded cDNA. Hence, such first cDNA strand synthesis done in combination with second strand synthesis with a similar primer adapter having different restriction enzyme site. And the same principle is there for oligo-DT primer linker for directional cloning. The primers used for second cDNA strand synthesis. In order to obtain a molecule that is stable and can be manipulated and cloned into a vector, the mRNA in the single-stranded cDNA mRNA hybrid needs to be replaced with a cDNA strand of the same sequence. This second cDNA strand synthesis is conveniently carried out by E. coli DNA polymerase I or Clino enzyme or reverse transcriptase or T4 DNA polymerase. Thermostable DNA polymerase such as TTH and Taq DNA polymerases can also be used. Self-priming. This strategy takes advantage of the tendency of reverse transcriptase to form a hairpin loop during the first cDNA strand synthesis, which is used as a primer for second cDNA strand synthesis. This hairpin is formed due to spontaneous intermolecular base pairing during reverse transcriptase reaction. And this technique is advantageous because a single primer that is used for the first cDNA strand synthesis is used to synthesize the second cDNA strand as well. And this method leads to higher yield of double-stranded cDNA. For cloning double-stranded cDNA into a suitable vector, hairpin loop is removed in a reaction catalyzed by S1 nuclease. As it is an uncontrolled reaction, there may be frequent loss of cDNA sequences corresponding to the 5' end of mRNA. And in this, you can see the schematic representation of self-priming classical method of double-stranded DNA synthesis. Here, the first strand synthesis by reverse transcriptase, and later the formation of a hybrid between single-stranded cDNA and mRNA, denatured by boiling or hydrolyzing by alkali treatment. And here the self-priming occur due to the tendency of reverse transcriptase to form a hair loop. It is due to intermolecular base pairing during reverse transcriptase reaction. So the single primer that is used for first cDNA strand synthesis is used for the synthesis of the second cDNA strand synthesis as well. And for cloning double-stranded cDNA into a suitable vector, this hairpin loop is removed in a reaction catalyzed by S1 nuclease. RNase H recognizes a single-stranded cDNA mRNA hybrid and makes many nicks or gaps in the RNA strand. Many RNA fragments thus graded along the length of the first cDNA strand provide free 3' groups to be used as primer for extension by polymerase, and it has three main advantages. The first one is that the priming is very efficient, and such priming does not need any further treatment or purification strategies, and the third thing is that it eliminates the need to use S1 nuclease and hence is free from disadvantages such as loss of cDNA sequences that result from S1 nuclease treatment. The next method of priming is oligonucleotide priming. In this method, homopolymeric tail is added to the 3' end of the newly synthesized first cDNA strand. This tailing is done by exploiting the activity of terminal deoxynucleotide transferase, that is TDT, a template-independent DNA polymerase from calf thymers in the presence of only single type of DNTP. For example, the addition of oligo-DC tail in the presence of DCTPs. This oligo-DC tail then acts as an annealing site for the chemically synthesized complementary oligonucleotide primer, that is oligo-DG. RT-PCR can be used to provide the cDNA for light reconstruction when the source of mRNA is unsuitable for conventional approaches. In this technique, instead of gene-specific primer, we can use universal primers. Screening and preservation of DNA libraries. Library screening is a process of identification of the clones carrying the gene of interest. Screening relies on a unique property of a clone in a library. The DNA libraries consist of a collection of probably many thousand clones in the form of either plates or colonies in a plate. Screening of libraries can be done by following approaches based on detecting a particular DNA sequence and gene expression. Methods of screening based on detecting a DNA sequence. The first one is the screening by hybridization. Nucleic acid hybridization is the most commonly used method of library screening, and it was first developed by Grunston and Harkness in 1975 to detect DNA sequences in transformed colonies using radioactive RNA probes. It relies on the fact that a single-stranded DNA molecule used as a probe can hybridize to its complementary sequence and identify the specific sequences. This method is quick and can handle a very large number of clones and is used in the identification of cDNA clones. The commonly used method of hybridization are colony hybridization and plate hybridization. The first method is colony hybridization, which is also known as replica plating, and allows the screening of colonies plated at high density using radioactive DNA probes. This method can also be used to screen plasmid or cosmid based libraries. The next method is plate hybridization. It is known as plate lift and was developed by Benton and Davis in 1977 and employs a filter lift method applied to phage plates. This procedure is successfully applied to the isolation of recombinant phage by nucleic acid hybridization and probably is the most widely applied method of library screening. And let's see the methodology of plate hybridization or plate lift. The nitrocellulose filter is applied to the upper surface of agar plates, making a direct contact between plates. Let's see the schematic process for screening libraries by plate hybridization. The nitrocellulose filter is applied to the upper surface of agar plates, making a direct contact between plates and filter. The plates contain phage particle as well as considerable amount of unpacked recombinant DNA which bind to the filter. The DNA is denatured, fixed to the filter, hybridized with radioactive probes and assayed by autoradiography. This method results in a cleaner background and distinct signal, and multiple screens can be performed from the same plate as plates can be lifted several times. Screening can be performed at very high density by screening small plates. High density screening has the advantage that a large number of recombinant clones can be screened for the presence of sequences homologous to the probe in a single experiment. The probes that can be used include an oligonucleotide derived from the sequence of a protein product of the gene, or a DNA fragment or oligo from the related gene of another species. And the next method is screening by PCR. PCR screening is employed for the identification of rare DNA sequences in complex mixture of molecular clones by increasing the abundance of a particular sequence. Then the screening methods based on gene expression. The first one is immunological screening. This involves the use of antibodies that specifically recognize antigenic determinants on the polypeptide, and it does not rely upon any particular function of the expressed foreign protein, but it requires an antibody specific to the protein. Let's see the schematic representation of immunological screening. A nitrocellulose disc is placed onto the surface of an agar plate containing the phage library. Both agar plate and disc are marked so as to realign them later. And when the nitrocellulose disc is lifted off again, proteins released from the bacteria by phage lysis bind to the disc, and these proteins bind to specific antibody. Plaques formed by bacteriophage that express a protein bound to the antibody that will be detected by emission of light, and positive clones can be identified by realignment. Another advancement was the use of blue-white screening. This blue-white screen is a screening technique that allows for the rapid and convenient detection of recombinant bacteria in vector-based molecular cloning experiments. The DNA of interest is ligated into a vector. The vector is then inserted into a competent host cell viable for transformation, and which are then grown in the presence of X-gal. Cells transformed with vectors containing recombinant DNA will produce white colonies, and cells transformed with non-recombinant plasmids, that is only the vector, grow into blue colonies. This method of screening is usually performed using a suitable bacterial strain, but other organisms such as yeast can also be used for this purpose. Beta-galactose is a protein encoded by the LAC-Z gene of lactoferrin, and it exits as a homotetramer in its active state. For screening the clones containing recombinant DNA, a chromogenic substrate known as X-gal is added to the agar plate. If beta-galactose is produced, X-gal is hydrolyzed to form 5-bromo-4-chloroindoxyl, which spontaneously dimerizes to produce an insoluble blue pigment called 5,5-dibromo-4,4-dichloroindigo. The colonies formed by non-recombinant cells therefore appear blue in color, while the recombinant ones appear white. The desired recombinant colonies can be easily picked and cultured.